So here's the fuselage. And I'm going to put the bottom piece on the rear just to show how that's going to go on there. Got to make sure it fits straight down there. Had a little issue, but it worked. But first to show you how I cut these out. I took a very brand new sharp number 11 blade. And before I had skinned this, I actually cut these a little bit, not all the way through, just a little bit with the X-Acto blade. So these have already been sort of pre-cut. The idea was that I find if I cut these out before I skin something, especially around a curve, I get weird puckering. So I left them whole, so they folded around nice, and then I just cut them out very carefully. But since they've already been perforated, they cut out really easy, as long as you use a really sharp blade. So that's just the way I took the cockpits off, and they actually line up great. It'd be a bummer to open those up and look in, and there's no seats under there, because remember, it was all kind of blind. But it worked fine. As usual, find a marker or paint that approximates the area around the color that you're trying to approximate. And now there's a little cockpit combing that goes on there. Those little curved pieces of a couple of fish bones here, those are the cockpit combings. So those are very thin. I probably could have just painted them and they would have been fine. But cut them out. You can see them on the table there on the mat. And then just put a little bit of glue along where that white area is, because that's where they're going to go. And then very deftly and carefully just plop them down and push them, make sure they glue down. And that just finishes off those edges. And so the rear cockpit, you can see, is done. I did the very same thing on the front cockpit. And that just makes it ready for, really the next thing to go there would be the windshields. But you just make sure they're nice and clean and straight. And you make sure that it looks good. I've taken off a little excess glue that might have squeegeed out. But just make sure it's on there, and there you go. Now, the rear section, there's a piece of rear section that's on wood, again, on 1/32 sheet, and that goes in that tail end, king post, maybe it's called, and that goes back there. And you can see the bottom is weird because there's no structure. It literally is butt glued, which is what I'm doing here, all on the bottom. And not a fan of this. I would think it would have been a better idea to actually have a piece that's cut the same shape as the bottom covering, skin. Put that in first, and then put this piece of paper on. But so far it's okay. These models don't weigh anything. So, for instance, back there where my fingers are, there's going to be a tail skid. Hopefully this will be enough. It's weird to me that the top has a piece of wood on it, but the bottom doesn't. And you can see there's overlap. That's another reason I don't like this method, because you can see there's white down there. That had to be trimmed off. Here I'm just taking off excess glue that squished out. But you have to trim that off, which I think I've already done here. Now, the next thing to do is the turtle deck. So they're supposed to fit along those little saw teeth and up against a former on the top there and roll all the way back. And what I found was these shark teeth gave me no end of trouble. The first couple were okay, but I could not get them down to a point where one side would be good, the other side wouldn't, and you'd see pieces underneath. And I tried coloring them, I tried squashing them down, I tried rolling them over. I couldn't get them to the way I really wanted them. I didn't know what to do. So I tried a couple things. Where that line is, I decided maybe I should just take the teeth off past that line. Maybe they'll work, because up near the front, behind the cockpit, I was able to sort of hide them. But in the rear, I wasn't. So from there back, I thought maybe I can just cut off the little teeth, and that might help me. Sharp X-Acto, and just cut these off all the way back, and I think it would look okay. And the other thing I did was I took the turtle deck up to my printer, and I copied it slightly bigger. So the one that's closer to the fuselage is the one I printed off. It's 104%. So it's a tiny, tiny bit bigger. I was hoping that would be enough to make it roll over the sides and fit better. So here I am taking the little teeth off, and I just cut down at the base using that piece of wood and just cut everything off, and then I sanded them down a little bit, trying to keep the side color on the fuselage as intact as possible. But I just kind of sanded these over, and in the end, I like the way this looks better. And now I spent, a half an hour fitting these, trying to see which one would work better. Would the 104% one work better, or would the stock one work better? So I'm trying to make sure that everything gets covered. And in the end, and everything gets covered on both sides nicely. In the end, I think I discovered that the 104% one, though a good idea, here I am checking the one that came with the kit now. Though a good idea, it just overlapped a little bit more than it needed. And especially taking those teeth off, I think I could make it work, make the original piece work. And you can see there on the left, all those little pieces, those are all the little teeth. And all I did, this is boring for you, but I just kept trying back and forth on deciding which turtle deck should I use. So there's my reprinted one that's a little bigger. And again, this would have worked, but the more I looked at it, I thought, not quite. That's the 104% enlarged one. Okay? But it's worth a shot. I wasn't sure. Had to go back and keep coloring things because I would try to put on the decking and then you'd see white. So I kept playing around back and forth, back and forth. And then I rolled this as best I could with a tapered brush handle. And there's a dry fit that actually looked pretty good. And I ended up getting rid of this one. There it goes. Boom. So I ended up using the kit one, which is good. But again, only after I'd taken off those triangles. But again, this is after a good half an hour of test fitting and dry fitting to make sure it would work and look sufficiently cool. Notice I took even more of those triangles off. See that? One side I left them on, once I left them off. Kept taking them off. But I think I was ready to finally commit to glue. So I added glue around the edges. And then just pop this little guy over the top, and then you just take your time trying to make sure it's straight. Again, the glue dries quick, but if you just kind of keep working it and making sure that it's, curved around and hitting all the points where there's glue, you can always go back and put a little extra on, which I had to do. But you're trying to make sure it all looks pretty good. And as long as you've colored some of the edges, that hides some issues. You'll see, though, that this turtle decking, I don't know, it's not museum quality. It certainly isn't Polish. There's a big blob there, a big opening there that looks terrible, that I had to go back and put some glue in. And actually, it ended up not looking that good anyway. I'm going to have to do some touch-up paint on that one. I think it's when I cut off the little triangles, I went down a little deep, so here I'm trying to close it. And I closed it a little bit, but not really sufficiently. So I am going to have to go back and either use filler and paint that. I'm going to do something because you can see when you look, see it's missing there. That chunk of the roundel is out, and it's basically an open space. So that's bad. Whoops, I slipped up there. But overall, I got it on, and it went okay. And now I can move on to other things like the front end and the tail section. I'm going to do the tails next because they might be a little more fun to add some color. But anyway, she's on her way.